Alright guys, so I'm here gonna make a video for you on the Seriously Pro Racing F3 Mini flight controller. I just got this in the mail from Get FPV. It was around $50 plus $3 for shipping. I couldn't find any good all-in-one sources online for how to set this up, so I did some digging and I figured I'd put this up as a just a little tutorial video to get you up and running on clean flight and get your latest firmware flashed. Painless 360 is supposedly doing a video coming up soon, so I'm not going to go super in depth on this because I'm sure he'll get all those bases covered, but if you're having trouble getting this set up, then this is why it's here. So the first thing you want to do in this picture, you see there's two red boxes. On the innermost one, there's two pads. It says boot. This is on the top of the flight controller. You want to take and you want to bridge those two solder pads. I would do this before I did anything else so you can get your firmware on there, because I did it backwards. I put everything together, then I tried to flash, and I realized that I had to bridge these two pads, so I had to tear everything down and then flash my firmware after bridging these pads. But you want to bridge these pads first. That'll allow your flight controller to go into DFU mode. This allows it to be flashed. After you flash it, you have to take and you have to desolder these pads in order to connect to it, or else you're going to have to flash your firmware every time you want to connect, which is no good. After you solder those pads, you want to open up Clean Flight, and you want to take and you want to download these drivers. They're all closed in this red box. It's right on the welcome page. You need the CP210X, the STM USB, and the ZDIG drivers. You need to download those in order to take and connect this flight controller to Clean Flight. Once you've downloaded and installed those, then you want to take and you want to go over to the firmware flasher page. Now you're going to want to make sure on the drop down box here you select the SPracingF3 Mini. Don't select the SPracingF3. If you select the wrong firmware, you might risk bricking your flight control, and then you have to go in through a UART bridge or something else to reprogram, which is no fun. So make sure you select F3 Mini. Then you want to take and make sure you select full chipper rates and manual baud rate at 25,600. Make sure if you've done everything correctly, in the top right to the left of the green connect button, the first box will say DFU and then the second box will be blank. On this screenshot you don't see that because I've already flashed and I desoldered that bridge, so it doesn't show up. Once this is all set, on the bottom middle button it says load firmware online. Click that, it'll pull the latest firmware. Make sure it gets all loaded up, then you can click flash firmware. That bar will take and will say erasing chip and then programming successful if everything goes correctly. Then it will automatically connect you to the flight controller and bring you into Clean Flight. You want to if it were me, I would disconnect immediately and then desolder that boot bridge, because if you try to plug your flight controller in and connect again, it's still going to be in DFU mode and it won't allow you to connect. So I would just desolder that boot bridge first off, so then you don't have to worry about that. If you like to flash your firmware a lot, or if you want to use Betaflight or anything like that and you want to flash nightly builds, I would recommend soldering a switch to that little bridge for the boot connector. That way you can flash it very easily by just flipping the switch to put it into DFU mode. If you just want to flash it and forget it, you can do it once and then put your flight controller deep down in your quad wherever you want, and you don't have to worry about it. After you've flashed your firmware and done all that, you can connect to Clean Flight. Now on this page we see the ports. On the first one you have USB VCP and MSP is selected. Leave that there, that's so it can communicate with Clean Flight. The second one is UART1. MSP may be enabled. You want to disable that, and then seeing as I'm using an SBus receiver, you want to select Serial RX. That way your receiver can communicate with your flight controller through the SBus port. And if you're using CPPM, it's not going to matter, but I'm using an X8R, so I'm using SBus. Now if you go to UART2, I'm also using telemetry. So on the drop down, I select Smart Port for my telemetry. If you're using different telemetry like MSP or FreeSky, select that. That's on our UART2 port. The UART3, you can use that for GPS or other stuff if you want. Like I said, I'm not going into detail. I'm just getting you up and flying in this video. Then you have your configuration page. These are all your basic configurations for clean flight. You can see under the receiver mode, I have serial selected. And then below that, I have the in serial receiver provider, I have SBus selected because that's what I'm using. Then if you scroll down the page, you'll see on the bottom right it says other features. I enable telemetry and black box because this has an SD card on it, so you can have black box logging right to the SD card. A thing to note is you want to use a UHS 1 class SD card. That's a very fast write speed SD card, so you can take and you won't lose data if you're going over your black box stuff. The other thing you want to look at is system configuration right above other features. This will tell you how fast your flight controller is processing PIDs. Seeing as it's an F3 flight controller, it can go very fast. I have it set at 1500 right now. I'm sure I could go faster. Now, by faster, the lower that value is, the faster it'll cycle. So if I went up to 1800, the cycles per second would go down. If I went down to 1000, the cycles per second would go up. So the faster you want to go, the lower that number has to be that you're adjusting. Alright, on this picture, you're looking at the bottom of the flight controller. The micro SD card is on the bottom. I, like an idiot, soldered all my pins on the bottom. So it depends on what you want. If you want to solder them on the bottom so you can have access to the micro SD, do that. If you want to solder them on the top, do that. It's your preference. I soldered them on the bottom. I wanted to have some on the bottom, some on the top. I ended up soldering all of them on the bottom because I rushed it, but it is what it is. If you look here on the printed circuit board, it says 2 to 4S battery. The manual says 2 to 5S, if I'm not mistaken. If you're going to use anything more than 4S, I would contact the manufacturer to double check before you fry something. The good thing about this connection is it supplies the voltage to your flight controller, your receiver, and it also supplies the current battery voltage for your telemetry. So you only have to run one wire to power all of that stuff. You don't have to run, like on the Naze, you don't have to run battery monitoring wires as well as a 5-volt back and everything. That's all built in, so that's really nice. You also want to take note of the polarity. The red and the black arrows are showing the polarity. If you reverse that, you risk blowing something, and then you're going to have to either solder a new voltage regulator on the board, which is extremely small by looking at all the surface mount components, or buy a new flight controller. So take note of the polarity. On this picture, you're also looking at the bottom of the board. This is opposite where we were just talking. So you see the 4 pins. Those are for your ESCs. On the left of that, this is the UART2 header. This is for our telemetry. I was having some issue. I was confusing the UART3 and the UART2 headers. The outermost pin that the green is pointing to is where you want to connect your smart port if you're connecting smart port telemetry. It might be different if you're using MSP or FreeSky. I'm not sure. I don't have any of that to test. But this is where I connect if I'm using smart port, so that I can send all my stuff back to my Tyrannus so I can view it in real time. And you only need that one pin there. This last picture is where you're going to be hooking up your receiver for inputs. The 2 red arrows are indicating plus 5 volts. The black arrow is your ground. Blue arrow is for CPPM. So if you're using something like a D4R2, that's where you would hook up your input. The yellow arrow is for SBus. So that's where I hook up my input because I'm using an X8R. I just made up a small header that connects to my receiver, and I plug it in right there for the yellow, red, and black, and it's all set. That's going into the UART1 header. You're going to want to take and hook it up to Clean Flight and make sure that all your channels are in the right order and everything's going through right. Well, that's what you want to do. The other thing to note is you see above that there's a 6-pin header there. It says PWM5, PWM6. And then if you go all the way to the right, it says PWM7 and PWM8. Those are if you're using other ESCs. So if you're using a hex or an octocopter, you can hook your ESCs up to that. So this will support up to 8 ESCs. Your main 4 ESCs are on the bottom of this picture where those 4 pins are, but you have the option to hook up to 4 more ESCs. So this is a pretty beefy board for what it has and how small it is. But that's pretty much the basics that I wanted to cover in this video, just to get you up and running with it. If you have any questions or anything, you know, put it down in the comments. I'll do my best to help. I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I figured I condense all of this into one place so you guys could see what was going on. So if you liked it, leave a like. If you disliked it, leave a dislike. If you think I'm an idiot, tell me in the comments. But other than that, this was it. Thanks.